talk to your buddy. It's right there.
Well, yeah, I was reading Timmy's index. Yeah, he's talking to his fucking buddy.
Yeah, there's like literally one right there on the power line. Oh yeah. I can't walk in front of that because I'm gonna be partially naked. Yeah, so it's like way too close.
So long.
Damn it.
Finding, oh my god.
It's fucking hilarious. Did you see the donut? Like, watch the donut that's in the case, and then the donut that he pulls out.
It got chocolate on it.
Yeah, and that other one doesn't. It looks like a fucking bear claw or something. Or a cruller, or what they call it.
Finding an empty corner of the drawing room to hide in, Sarah gazed silently out the window and considered Harmony's situation. Her father had long ago declared himself a Tory, staunchly loyal to the English monarchy. But the reason why, it seemed, had little to do with his love of fat King George's crown and everything to do with the British half-crown. Profits had skyrocketed for the Crane's Harmony-based shipping business since the British had closed Boston's harbor 2 years ago, and Harmony had become one of the few ports of trade in this area of the country not blockaded and thus legally able to receive European shipments. This had made Alfred Crane a very happy shipping merchant, but Sarah was increasingly concerned about the less fortunate members of the town, who had been forced to house and feed the British soldiers. To add insult to injury, these troops had been ordered not only to keep the port open for British ships and supplies, but also to enforce the British Parliament's restriction on fishing, a punishment to the colonists for their rebellions, one that was robbing New England's fishing families of any way to earn their living. Sarah knew her father barely tolerated any expression of her own views, but she did have her own views, and she'd read enough of Mr. Paine to believe that Sons of Liberty and the Minutemen were all correct in their opinions. The British Crown had taxed and bullied the American colonies beyond what was just America must declare her independence. Well, well, Miss Crane, I see you are in need of company. Sarah jumped at the sound of the deep British voice that tickled her ear from behind. It was the major from the group of four whom her father had introduced her. The officer was tall, blonde, and quite handsome, except for the smirking arrogance that so plainly wrote itself across his aristocratic features. May I say that you are quite above the average looks of the common colonial woman. You may say it, sir, if you wish to be an insensitive oaf. Sarah snapped, then quickly turned her back to him. To Sarah's dismay. However, instead of respecting her chilly message and leaving her in peace, the British officer simply moved to stand in front of her again. You are a feisty one, aren't you? He said with a raised blonde eyebrow. I pegged you right from the start. Pardon me? It's that rough-hewn colonial blood, I suppose. But what else can one expect? I think they're British. What else can one expect from families who have lived among the savages for 100 years? A shame that with all this shipping going on about you. He gestured at the expensive furnishing and draperies, the fancy carpeting and elegant clothing. Your father did not see fit to ship you back to England for some proper instruction in polite behavior. I act like a lady, sir, when I am in the company of a gentleman. Good evening. Sarah heard the officer's laughter as she stepped hastily away from him. She found her Aunt Jane after that and remained close by her for the rest of the evening. And then I punched somebody in the... This is really fucking long.
It is really smooth.
Hours later, the guests were just finishing the platters of baked beef, roast goose, crown pork, cheese, and fruit pies, warm loaves of bread, and bricks of chocolate that had been set before them at the large dinner table. Sarah thought the indulgence spread obscene in the face of the want she'd witnessed in many Harmony homes. Slipping away, she instructed the cook to quickly divide the abundance of leftovers into packages. Tomorrow morning, Sarah herself would deliver the food to the neediest families in the town.
I'm gonna watch this. I recorded his new alarm clock. Motherfucker party and there's an echo in the fucking speaker that woke his ass up. Like, whoa, what the fuck is that? It's my best name for this alarm. Guess a surprise.
When she returned to the party, she saw that the guests had left the dining room and had begun to scatter themselves throughout the first floor hallways and parlors. In the music room, one of the guests sat down at the pianoforte and music filled the air. Sarah noticed that some of the officers were beginning to pair off rather demonstrably with the merchant's daughters, while the parents purposefully gave the couples privacy by absenting themselves in the music room. Wanting nothing to do with these goings on, Sarah padded down the long hallway and slipped into the library at the back of the house. It was the perfect hiding place for the rest of the evening, and she could finally finish reading Mr. Payne in peace. After lighting the room's candle, she had barely had time to ease into her favorite rocking chair when she heard footsteps by the closed door. When Sarah looked up, she found the tall, blonde major entering the room. "Giving me the grand tour of your home, sweet one?" he asked, swiftly closing the door behind him. His face was flushed as red as his coat, his breath carrying a distinct aroma of a drink more potent than French wine. "You are drunk on rum, sir." "Yes, of course, it is a party, miss." "Leave this room at once," cried Sarah, leaping to her feet and pointing to the door behind him. To Sarah's horror, the officer merely smiled and turned the key in the lock with a shockingly determined click. "Did you hear me, Major?" Sarah wanted to flee, but the man was larger than she, and despite his drunken state, he appeared braced to intercept her should she attempt to run his blockade of the door. "Your prudish act does not fool me," said the officer as he took a step into the room, removed his coat, and draped it across the back of a nearby chair. "My eyes were upon you all night. You knew it. That is why you led me here." "You are quite mistaken, sir. I deplore your being here, in this room, in this house, and most of all, in my country." Ignoring her protest, the blonde officer moved in on her. "Hear me, miss. There is no need to continue your little teasing game. I am quite caught. Now let us enjoy ourselves. Come and kiss me." Sarah was outraged, so outraged that she waved the fancy stitchery book at him like a flag. "You are in my country, I say." "What's that?" he laughed. "The country of bobbins and needles?" "No." With her right hand, Sarah pulled Thomas Paine's pamphlet free of its hiding place and waved it under his nose. "The country of all those who value liberty." The red coat's eyes narrowed, and the laughter in them was replaced with something much harsher. He moved quickly, closing his fingers around the wrist, waving the patriot's pamphlet. "You are a foolish little girl, playing at dangerous games in the king's land. Do you realize that? The king is a tyrant," she charged in outrage, "and he lost his just rights to govern this land." "Very well, Miss Crane, play your game, and so shall I, my way." Tightening his grip with bruising force, the major forced Sarah to drop the pamphlet. "Stop this," she commanded. "Why, shall I not show what the king's soldiers do to female traitors?" He growled in her ear, his breath stinking from rum as he crudely squeezed her breast. "'Twill not be gentle, but I'm happy to oblige."
So yeah, dog.
Sarah tried to swing the heavy stitchery book in her left hand and strike the side of the redcoat's head, but even drunk, the soldier was too fast for her. In one lightning move, he knocked the book down, twisted her left wrist behind her, and shoved her swiftly backward. With all her might, Sarah fought him. Her white, powdered wig fell to the floor in the struggle as she tried to pull herself free of the officer's harsh grip. She kicked out, but the layers of petticoats made it impossible to swing her leg more than a few inches. In seconds, she was trapped by the officer, a solid wall of shells at her back. Stop this at once, I say. But the officer would not stop. He was quite skilled, in fact, at keeping her from wriggling free as he pinned her hands helplessly against the bookshelves. The noxious stench of alcohol and sweat combined with the man's vile assault was making her sick. Help, Sarah shrieked when she realized at last she could not help herself. Help! Who do you think will help you? The officer laughed. Do not you comprehend why you were paraded before us at this party? Do you not see you are part of the payment for our protection of this pathetic little town? Someone help! Be still and enjoy it, commanded the major, pressing his lower body into her skirts. Or must I treat you the way I've been treating the wenches from Harmony's less privileged families? Sarah shrank back as the officer raised his large hand above her head. Closing her eyes, Sarah braced for the blow. The sharp crack came loud and angry, but it did not land on her. Opening her eyes, Sarah gasped in shock. The blonde officer was no longer pinning her, he had fallen at her feet. Looming over her now, not far from the library's open window, was a tall American woodsman of about 20 years, with hair so brown it was almost black, and a pair of eyes as sharp as ravens. On his broad shoulders hung a wheat-colored homespun tunic. Strapped to his waist was a wide leather belt that defined hips so narrow they made his shoulders appear massive. On his long, strong legs, he wore rough brown breeches, and his knee-high boots were dusty enough to have been riding the countryside for hours. In his raised hands, he held the blunt end of a musket, and tucked into his wide leather belt were two loaded pistols. Good evening, miss, he said, then bent to check on the major. Still breathing, he pronounced with a hand over the major's mouth. Then he leaned closer. And enough rum to pickle a barrel of kooks, I'd say. Cute. Sarah was in a state of panic, her heart galloping faster than the hooves of her favorite mare. She glanced at the door. It was still closed and locked. Then she looked back toward the wide open window and shuddered as she realized that this dark-haired intruder must have been lurking right outside. I have traded one attacker for another, she thought in horror. While the intruder was still bending over the officer, Sarah grabbed a heavy volume off the shelf behind her, raised it high, and slammed it down. Yo! Cried the dark-haired man as the book bounced off his skull. Sarah instantly fled for the door. Unfortunately, far from rendering the man unconscious, the book trick did a little more than annoy the tall stranger. He jumped to his feet, grabbed Sarah by the shoulders, and plopped her down into a nearby chair. Be still, if you please. Help! Help! Sarah began to yell until the woodsman put a large hand over her mouth. Be quiet, miss. I am not here to harm you. Sarah eyed him. Though his hand was still covering her mouth, it was gently applied, and she realized had a rather pleasant smell of worn leather and the fresh outdoors about it. Will you promise to keep quiet? Sarah paused before answering. Despite his gentle touch, the man appeared very strong, with an almost feral look about him. She didn't doubt that he was capable of all kinds of ungentlemanly conduct. I could bite his fingers and attempt to flee. But in truth, she doubted the act would do more than perturb the woodsman, who looked as though he'd had a good deal of practice snagging game rabbits faster than she. It truly galled Sarah to give in to anything or anyone, but she felt it was her best course of action until she thought of another. Meeting his dark eyes, she nodded her agreement to his demand. For a moment, he seemed to weigh whether or not to trust her pledge, which in itself made her blood boil. Then finally he lowered his hand. Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Don't do that. That's weird. Too much thoughts. Too much darkness. Who are you, sir? She demanded at once in her most disdainful tone. Luke Fitzgerald, miss. A captain in the Massachusetts militia. Militia. A Minuteman? Aye, miss. Sarah blinked in astonishment and immediately hid any trace of admiration. After all, the man could be lying. For her own protection, she maintained her mask of Chilly Crane arrogance. Well, Captain, if what you say is to be believed, I'll have you know I I'll have you know that I am Miss Sarah Crane, daughter of Alfred Crane, master of this house. And I demand to know what you mean by breaking into a private home like a common criminal. Luke narrowed his eyes on Sarah. I save you from that fool redcoat snoring on your floor there, and this is the thanks I get, he muttered irritably, rubbing the spot where Sarah had beamed him with a volume of French poetry. Sarah folded her arms. The major has nothing to do with it. The captain sighed. Miss, it makes no difference to me if that officer was your attacker or your betrothed. My what? I have a mission to fulfill, and you're caterwauling in the arms of that officer was about to jeopardize it. I was being attacked, sir, I assure you. If you say so, I do say so. You may have saved me from ravishment, but your method scared the stuffing out of me, sneaking up like some sort of savage. You made no sound at all. Mhm. I take that as a compliment. Why, in heaven's name? Because I'm a scout, miss, and I'm here for a purpose. What purpose? The Continental cannons have chased the British out of Boston. We've sent them running north to Halifax. And this detachment of British soldiers here in Harmony is the King's last foothold in the New England port. We are here to free this town of its British occupation and claim it for the government of these United States. These what? Luke Fitzgerald stared at Sarah as if she suddenly couldn't understand English. These United States. Hearing the words, after so many months of waiting, hoping, praying, it seemed impossible. Do you mean to say they did it? They've declared independence yesterday, miss, in Philadelphia. Have you not heard? We have been British occupied, and we. No, Captain, we have not heard. No one in the town has. Overwhelmed with emotion, Sarah's voice trailed off. Her head bent and tears filled her eyes. For a moment, in the soft quiet, she began to sob. The sounds of the snoring redcoat, the summer crickets outside the open window, even the pianoforte at the end of the other end of the house, all faded in her head as the deep, resounding echo of this Minuteman's words filled her being. These United States, these United States, these United. The warm pressure beneath her chin brought her back to her surroundings. The Patriot's fingers were rough, yet his touch was gentle as it coaxed her face to turn up toward him. Wet streaks dampened her cheeks as Sarah's head tilted back and she realized that the tears that had been brimming in her eyes were now spilling down her cheeks. Do not be sad, Miss Crane. His voice was deep yet surprisingly tender. Liberty can seem a frightening thing at first, I grant you. 'Tis often easier to rely on others to rule us, to make our decisions for us, like a child wanting always the safety and riches of his parents' household. But choosing privilege and safety over liberty robs us of our ability to chart our own destinies, live our own lives. Liberty, you see, is worth the price of safety, and we Americans have finally made the choice to govern ourselves. No more tyrant king. We will be better off. You shall see, miss. So please, do not cry. As he spoke, Sarah gazed at this rugged man with new eyes. Finally, she allowed herself to admire the strength in his square shouldered build, the sturdiness of his lantern jaw and prominent cheekbones, the kindness in his long lashed eyes, so handsomely set beneath dark masculine brows. Captain Fitzgerald, she said at last, you misunderstand my tears. You are not saddened by this news? No, I am not, said Sarah, rising to her feet. I am overjoyed by it. Confusion crossed the captain's features until Sarah pointed at the floor. He looked down. A pamphlet was lying there. Common sense, he read with a lift of an eyebrow. The sun never shined on a cause of greater worth. quoted Sarah, a broad smile finally splitting her pretty tear-stained face. This time, it was Luke's turn to look at Sarah with new eyes. His dark gaze seemed to caress her cheek, her lips, her throat, then returned with more than a glimmer of admiration to her bright blue eyes. Now, what is the daughter of a Tory like Alfred Crane doing with Mr. Payne's pamphlet? Well, said Sarah with a half smile, I tried to get our snoring major over there to read it, but he simply was not interested. Imagine that, Luke said with a laugh. It seems to me that you are quite the patriot, Miss Crane. Welcome to our cause. Sarah Crane's face beamed with undisguised pride, not to mention the gratefulness she had been withholding from this man since he brained the redcoat with his musket. Thank you, she said at last. You are quite welcome. No, I mean thank you for, she gestured to the major. Oh, aye, you're quite welcome, said Luke with a slight bow and the faintest blush of humility. But I am afraid that lout is only a small part of this night's work, Miss Crane. Miss Crane. Whoa, passes out. Please call me Sarah, she said softly. Sarah, Luke said. His dark eyes sparkled as he gazed at her, as if he enjoyed saying her given name. Then his mind clearly turned to more serious thoughts, and the sparkle faded. Most of the Continental Volunteers have gone south to join General Washington. I was about to leave myself when I received an odd message 2 days ago in Boston about your father. An odd message? Aye, it was delivered by a strange sort of little man. He said his name was Timmy, and that he was a spy for the Patriots of Harmony. Timmy, muttered Sarah. There is a Timothy Reese who works sometimes on the Bennett farm, but Mr. Reese is at least 6 feet tall, not little, so could not have been him. I wonder who this Timmy is. Martimmy. Martimmy has a fucking Martimmy in his index. This is probably the longest damn chapter in the book right here. Yeah, I gotta go back. I'm only on chapter blah, like 17 or 18.
Shit's weird. Look at this.
I'm gonna like that. Feel tingly.
Yeah, you know, wait.
You are the literal worst. Let's take a nap. Let's take a nap, motherfucker. Let's take. That'll be my next single. God. Here's a Martini. No, I cannot believe it. This could not possibly be another version of me. I know, dear reader, that you're probably asking yourself how revolutionary word Timmy happened to appear to Luke. Well, Timmy has found an answer in Tabby's diaries. Apparently, when Tabby heard about Alfred Crane's big bash for the British officers, she decided to sew up a brand new, that was so many bees, a brand new Timmy doll and send him off to Boston to fetch military muscle. A little judicious, this is so annoying. Little judicious scrying in her crystal bowl revealed that the best bet for Timmy's contact was a young man named Luke Fitzgerald. 2 years before, Luke left his family farm in Harmony to join up with the Minutemen and was eventually stationed in Boston with the Continental Army. Tabby sent Timmy to convince him to come back to Harmony and kick out the Redcoats, or at least give it his best darn pistol shot. Well, whoever he was, this little man came to visit me this morning in Boston. He told me that Alfred Crane was holding a party this night in the Raven Hill home to entertain every British officer stationed in the Harmony area. What did you do? I took the little spy to my commanding officers. There was not enough time to move artillery or troops into place, so I asked for a detachment of militia. They agreed to give me only 10 men. Then they warned me not to act until I confirmed the little man's claim. Well, said Sarah, I do assume you have peeked in our windows and seen the rest of the officers in the drawing room, have you not? I saw them earlier and have already dispatched a man under my command, Hancock Bennett, to bring back reinforcements. I'm afraid we're on our own until daybreak. Now I'm down to nine men, 3 of whom I've already sent to alert the townspeople to arm themselves. Interesting little choice on Luke's part. After he gets a peek at Sarah in the Crane Mansion window, he chooses Hancock Bennett to send back to Boston. Timmy does believe Hancock is the previous life of Sam Bennett's brother, Hank, and it also looks to the highly astute Tim as if Luke wasn't going to take any chance on Hancock charming Sarah before he could. This all sounds so dangerous. Mere townspeople defending themselves against seasoned soldiers? I know, Sarah. That is why I have returned to your home. Why? To come up with a plan, a way to capture the Redcoat officers and convince them to evacuate with as little bloodshed as possible. And how will you do this? Luke sighed. Sorry to tell you, miss, but I'm still thinking. In the quiet of the mansion's library, Sarah Crane listened to Luke Fitzgerald's concerns. He was drastically outnumbered in the Crane household. He had exactly 6 tired and hungry Minutemen waiting in the garden outside, while 24 rested and well-fed British officers were scattered throughout the first floor's parlors. How could Luke possibly capture the officers without discharging weapons and endangering Sarah's family and friends? I have an idea, said Sarah.
Oh, Mom. Hell yeah. Take it in. Make sure I pull it out.
The plan she had laid out was dangerous for her. If it failed, she could be hanged. Ew. But Sarah insisted that it was their only option. Luke could think of no better way to avoid bloodshed, so he agreed and signaled his 6 men. Until one of them spoke, Sarah would have thought them ghosts for the soundless way their silhouettes slipped through the library window and into the candlelit room. The men were of vastly different ages, and all were dressed the same as Luke, with homespun tunics, roughly made breeches, and well-worn leather boots. The last of them, the youngest, caught Sarah's attention, primarily because he looked like a much younger version of Luke himself. Psst, Mickey, come here, Luke whispered to the 15-year-old boy. Ah, Miss Crane, may I present my brother, Michael? Luke whispered awkwardly in an obvious effort to offer Sarah a modicum of civility, even in the midst of a rebel invasion. Say hello, Mickey, he added, poking his brother in the arm. Oh, pleased to meet you, Miss Crane, he said, said a blushing Michael with a polite bow, one that appeared to include a sharp elbow to his older brother's ribs for embarrassing him. Pleased to meet you as well, Mr. Fitzgerald, Sarah returned, trying her darndest not to laugh at Luke's contorted face at the momentary loss of air to one lung. By the way, Michael, aka Mikey or Mickey, is the past life of one of Pilar Lopez Fitzgerald's sons, due to be born a few years after Luis Miguel Lopez Fitzgerald. All the men around Sarah were well armed with muskets and pistols, and Sarah exhaled a nervous breath. She would have no pistol or musket to defend herself, but she did have one thing. Her white powdered wig still sat on the floor where the major had knocked it off. She nearly laughed out loud when she realized that this woman's wig would serve the Patriots' cause more powerfully than any man's pistol or army cannon. Thank you, Father, she thought, amused, as she picked it up and repinned it to her yellow hair. Since you insisted that I be properly dressed tonight, I'm sure to make the British officers feel right at home. Adjusting her skirts and pinching her cheeks, she glanced at Luke. Be careful, Miss Crane, he whispered. Keep your muskets loaded, boys, she advised the men with a wink. Luke's eyebrows rose in amazement when the rough-hewn men around him nodded obediently at Sarah. Looks like we've got ourselves a new commanding officer, he remarked with a half smile. I can shoot straight, sir, asserted Sarah. Just as long as you're not aiming at us, replied Luke. The men laughed softly, and Sarah did too. Do be careful, Sarah, Luke said again, and this time she saw the serious concern in his eyes. Timmy's out his rabbit ass motherfucking mind. Watch me his fucking face. Yeah, this is not even funny. Oh, I'm shaking. Is this the last video? I put it. I'm gonna put that there. I found out what I really am. Yeah, 317. Man, hell no. What page would I be on? 332. I read page 317, 332. So I'll go back for that later. That dude's out his rabbit ass. I'm on chapter 17, which is the Lopez Fitzgeralds, I believe. Is that it? Is this right one? Yeah, it gotta be. Man, the Lopez Fitzgeralds are crazy. Fuck. Tabitha had finished viewing a significant portion of Sheridan's past life in colonial Harmony when the 2-year-old's tiny fingers suddenly released the pretty crystal amulet hanging around the witch's neck. Tabby blinked as her psychic visions vanished. Gone were the dusty streets filled with the horse-drawn wagons, the harbor of tall masted ships, and the redcoats. Thanks very much for the look back, Sarah. Sheridan, whispered Tabitha as she set the child down and waggled her finger. Now be off with you, my dear. With a happy squeal, Sheridan ran after the wonderful red ball as it once again began to magically roll itself back across the lawn of the town's green, still crowded with panicking Independence Day. Hell's bells, Tabby cried a moment later, ducking a whizzing plastic disc. Excuse me, ma'am, called a dark-haired man in his late 20s. Would you mind handing that frisbee to my son? Tabby's eyes narrowed in annoyance until she turned and realized who had spoken to her. It was Martin Fitzgerald, and the son he was speaking about was Luis Lopez Fitzgerald. Of course, she called to Martin as she bent to pick up the irritating toy. Here you are, Luis, she cooed. The little dark-haired, dark-eyed boy ran up to the witch on fast little legs. Gracias, thank you, he cried as he reached out his tiny hand to grasp the red disc. Immediately, Tabby focused her power. Using the plastic frisbee to bridge a psychic connection, she began to read the child's subconscious memories. But a split second later, the boy was tugging the disc free, and the witch got nothing more than a glimpse of his past lifetimes. Well, that one was a wash. The sorceress stole her cat as she watched Luis run across the lawn to rejoin his father. But at least I got to confirm for certain that Luke Fitzgerald's soul is back, reincarnated as Luis Lopez Fitzgerald. And that wasn't all that Tabby had confirmed. It appears that Luis's soul met Sheridan's in other lifetimes after the Revolutionary War, but that's all I had time to read. The witch then cast one final glance at Martin Fitzgerald, who was rejoining his wife Pilar on a picnic blanket. I understand that Martin is working for the Cranes, the witch told her cat. A shame, but what happened to poor Luke Fitzgerald? Is any indication when a Fitzgerald works for a Crane, it's truly a bad idea. Pilar, I've been waiting to tell you some good news. Good news is always welcome, said Pilar, wiping little Luis's mouth with a paper napkin. The family had just finished their meat and vegetable empanadas, and Pilar was about to unpack dessert, Mexican chocolate brownies made from her beloved grandmother, Teresa's special recipe. I got a raise, announced Martin proudly. Oh, Martin, that's wonderful. Pilar threw her arms around her handsome young husband. Did you hear that, boy? She asked her two sons. Now Daddy can buy you both the bicycles you wanted. 5-year-old Antonio grabbed his little brother Luis's hands, and they yipped and hollered and danced around the picnic blanket. Martin lifted an eyebrow at his wife. I didn't say anything about bicycles, Pilar, he scolded quietly. Oh, Martin, what do boys so young understand about a raise? But bicycles, they understand. I know you've been saving for that. Okay, you're right. Martin gave in with a sparkle in his eye. So what about you? What can Daddy's raise buy you, sweetheart? He whispered teasingly in her ear. I want a Nina, another baby, a little girl this time, so I can name her after my grandmother, Teresa, and another boy to name after my father, Miguel. Okay, I can't do that for long. It's like crazy. Oh, Pilar, I'm sorry. I want us to have a daughter, one as beautiful as you, and another boy, but the raise isn't enough for us to afford a third child, let alone a fourth. Not yet, but soon. How soon? Things are going very well. Alistair Crane himself called my supervisor at Crane Industries, got me promoted. I am not a junior executive yet, but at least I'm off the factory floor and into the back office. Alistair Crane? How in heaven's name would a man like that know you, Martin? It seems so strange. No, honey, nothing strange about it. Mr. Craig heard about some new ideas of why the same Craig Industries a lot of money. He was happy to hear who they came from, and he said that the Fitzgerald have been working for the Craig family for a very long time. He remembered my grandfather working for his grandfather, and he told my boss that I should be promoted. Pilar's smile faded as an unsettling chill slowly seeped into her system. Come on, Pilar, why the frown? I don't know. I just don't trust the Cranes. It's a feeling I have. I cannot explain it. You worry too much, sweetheart. Why not just remember that old saying? Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Martin, Pilar, Martin, Pilar replied firmly. That saying comes from the famous story of the Trojan horse. And do you know what my grandmother Teresa once told me? If the Greeks had looked in the mouth of that gift horse before they rolled into their fortress, they would have seen a legion of Trojan troops waiting inside to slit their throats. Martin laughed. I've met your grandmother, Pilar, and I know you love her, but she's a suspicious, superstitious old woman. Stop being so suspicious yourself and just be happy for a minute over some good news. The Cranes are going to bring us good fortune. I'm sure of it. Pilar wasn't so sure, but she didn't want to argue with her husband on such a fine summer day. Come on, sweetheart, he whispered, leaning close. Kiss me. Pilar did, and her chilling, troubling thoughts quickly warmed, as they always did when Martin's lips brushed hotly across her own. How she loved him. He was so kind and tender as a husband, so thoughtful and attentive as a father, and his eyes still carried the same spark of passion from the day they'd met 6 years ago. Martin had been in the army then, stationed in New Mexico, near the small town where her uncle Carlos lived. One of Martin's army buddies turned out to be a cousin of Pilar's, and he'd invited Martin to attend the Lopez family wedding with him. She had been a bridesmaid, dressed in pale pink lace, with fresh blossoms in her unswept hair, and by I mean upswept hair. And in Martin's dark gaze, she saw such a thrilling combination of fascination and tenderness she could not help but respond to him. He was so handsome and fit in his military uniform, so gallant and kind when he'd approached her uncle to ask permission for a dance. Pilar had come to America at 14 for one reason, to get a better education in order to become a doctor. Her Uncle Carlos and Aunt Marta had taken her in and become her second family, and she'd worked hard to become one of the top students at the local American high school. She had just finished her first year of college at the time she'd met and quickly fallen in love with Martin. It had not been easy for Pilar to leave her native country at 14 to kiss her mother, father, brothers, sisters farewell. She found it equally difficult to say goodbye to her uncle, aunt, and grandmother in New Mexico, but Pilar could not bear to see Martin leave New Mexico without her. When, after 6 months of intense courtship, he had asked her on bended knee to become his bride and follow him back to his New England hometown, she'd readily agreed. Never for one day did Pilar regret her decision to marry Martin. Never for one day did she regret the unexpected pregnancy with Antonio. With two beautiful boys laughing nearby, she was certain she'd been truly blessed, that life could never be happier. And she was confident that once she and Martin had finished creating the big family they talked about having, she could again return to her studies and her girlhood dream of becoming a doctor. Martin had promised to support her in pursuing that dream one day, and she knew that was part of the reason he was working so hard to increase his salary now. Oh, I almost forgot, said Martin softly when their kiss finally ended. Forgot what? Asked Pilar. Mr. Crane, when he heard about my ideas and that I was a Fitzgerald, he took the time to stop by the office and shake my hand. He asked about my family, of course, and when he discovered what you do, that you work for the Winthrops, he asked me for a favor. Pilar drew back, and the slight chill of suspicion crept back into her system. A favor? What sort of favor? It's something you can do for his son, Julian. Julian? Pilar was stunned. What could Julian Crane want from me? Oh my God, I'm done. Look, that was chapter 17, okay? I'm gonna come back for chapter 18, like tomorrow, later, because I'm lazy. But I'm gonna remember that I'm on chapter 18, and I'm not gonna be like question mark.